Listen MKE is a community project in partnership between the Ideas Lab of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, WUWM 89.7 FM, Milwaukee's NPR, the Milwaukee Public Library, and Milwaukee PBS.
Peace and blessings and good morning. Much better if all moments in life could be that easy. My name is Venus Williams. I am privileged to be and humbled to be one of the ministers in this space and minister for the table. Is there an elder who can give me permission to speak? Thank you. What is your name? Was it Dennis? William. Well, Mr. William, thank you. I always like to also say that because you gave me permission, you are now responsible for every single word I say. So if you have any issues with anything I might say here, please go see Mr. William. Even in this moment, acknowledging that we have elders in the room who have lived these journeys, who have stories that continue to need to be told, and we recognize that within this room, there's a legacy of solutions if we only continue to come together to search them out. And so I want to welcome you to what is becoming the Table Vocational Center here at Capitol Drive Lutheran Church. As minister for the Table, we have been very intentional about wanting to birth a space, a sanctuary that focuses on vocation, that focuses on the journey of people, especially here on the north side of Milwaukee. Unapologetically, I am a north side of Milwaukee resident. How many blocks down do we live? We are 13 blocks away, and this is my neighborhood. It is important as we talk about trauma, as we speak to the need of healing and conflict transformation within this city. And please note that I did not say conflict resolution, because conflict will never be resolved. It is our responsibility as wounded healers ourselves to create spaces, to foster environments where we can transform the things that are broken into moments and spaces and lives and vocations that promote healing. And so it is an honor for me to be able to be here today to learn. I am a student today, just like we all are. And one of the things that I really want to make clear for us, because so many of us in this room have titles. Yes, nod your head if you have a title. Couldn't care less about your title today. A lot of us have led workshops and been speakers at conferences. Nod your head if you've been one of those people. You know what I'm going to say, couldn't care less today. Because we are here for our own personal journeys first, but also to learn a new way, a stronger way, a better way, a way of wellness and hope that this city is literally crying out for. I live on Capitol Drive. I hear the cries in so many ways, but I am also here, as I already stated, as a wounded healer, as one who grew up in a house of domestic violence and alcoholism, as one who saw violence very often on any given week on a daily basis. So I always want to point out that when you're on a pathway of healing, it never ends. We will never be done. And so I'm so grateful today for every single person who has made this moment happen. I hope today will be a moment of truth-telling, a moment of being open to what it is that is going on in this city in a way that we are ready to make deep change, even if it means it continues to make us uncomfortable. If it means that we have to change our thought patterns, how we move within the city, and most important to me, how we see the young people who are amongst us. Maybe not in this room as they will be. We will have events in this space that will not look like this, but that will look like those brown and black young people who we often cross the street to avoid. And so we're here today to not just talk about change, I hope, but to make some decisions on our own personal journeys that we just cannot continue to allow this city and our families and our people to live within the trauma that they are living within. And we are here to take some responsibility. Take some responsibility. As a Lutheran minister with the Greater Milwaukee Synod of the ELCA, I have been serving in this city for 33 years, and my work is just starting. So don't ask about retirement. Ask about resolution. Resolution to not the conflict, but to the eyes that we have chosen to see. I love our young people in this city. Some of you have been young people in this city with me. I ain't gonna name any names. It is a privilege to serve. There are some people in this room who are serving in this space as well. Cheryl, can you stand? I didn't tell her ahead of time because she would have went to the bathroom conveniently. Cheryl Robertson, the wellness studio that is right here, is one that she leads with all types of wellness programs. Please make sure you meet Cheryl. Demetrius, I saw you come in. Is he in the room? Demetrius, could you stand? Demetrius is the farm manager and one of the men's group facilitators here in this space. We are here. There are so many more of us, but we are here for you, and thank you, James, for allowing us. It's a privilege to be able to host this. I want to end by saying that there was a therapist in 1981 when I was a student at the University of Pittsburgh. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and she saved my life. I was one of the first non-Vietnam vets diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And she told me at that moment, Venus, you could continue school and you'll excel at school because you're good already at almost everything you do. But whether you are 25 or 35 or 55, you are going to fall apart if you do not do the work that you need to do in this moment. So I am grateful, even though I told you I don't care about your titles, for all of you who are intervening, and may we continue to intervene together, may we continue to learn together, and may we create a city that feels more whole and loving and not judging in these moments. Thank you. I don't even know, I can't remember when we met, but I do know that it was part of Urban Underground. And yes, Charlott's in here. And it was at the Kujichagulia Lutheran Center that is down the street, and it was when the Kujichagulia Lutheran Center was thriving, and this young man and many other young men, I'm looking at you, Mr. County Executive. Urban Underground has been a true gift in this city, and the number of leaders that it has helped to birth and create and form and mold who are guiding this city. We should be putting so much money and support into Urban Underground. And I'm saying that as another nonprofit organization. And so Jeremy's passion for youth started when he was a young person. You know, there are those young people who guide young people. We know some of them, right? That's who Jeremy was. That's who Jeremy continues to be. I'm putting you in young person, even though you're married and have a baby and all that wonderful stuff right now. And so it is, you don't know yet the honor that we have to have Jeremy as our moderator. Right now he serves for Milwaukee County in the Office of Prevention. The Department of Health Services. Like I said, the Department of Health Services. I wrote it out right here, and I can see. A commitment, you know, I just want to say this. There have been times when Jeremy has just called me and said, I need to talk. I need to figure out what I'm doing next. Can you just listen? And so again, when we gather with people who are younger than us, stop talking so much. Close your mouth and learn better to open ears so that we can learn from incredible people who are leading the city and who want to lead the city and are truly just searching for their vocation. So, Mr. Jeremy, can you please come up and take over from here? Please welcome Jeremy.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. How y'all doing? Great. I am a product of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, born and raised. I grew up on the South Side first, and then I went to 35th and Hampton. I speak to that, and I speak to that in pride. I understand that the places that we live in shape us, and the people that we engage with also shape us as well. So I'm also a product of Urban Underground, a product of many people in this city who have poured into me, and I just want to give a round of applause to every person, both young and older, every elder, no matter their race or their religion, who have already poured into our young people. Please give them a round of applause. All right, so let's get started on our agenda today. Today we're going to have a conversation, y'all. We're going to have a conversation in what we call beloved community. And all that means is when we show up recognizing that we are because we are. I am because we are. And we do that in reciprocity, which means I give the best of what I have, and I expect you to do the same thing. If you can agree to live and to breathe and to exist in this moment with love, consideration, with peace, and do that in reciprocity, raise your hand. That is the spirit, the energy, the cause that we show up with this space today. We're talking about trauma and we're talking about incarceration, just in case somebody didn't realize why they were here. Trauma and incarceration. What we won't do today is harp on all of the problems. I have a mentor called Reggie Moore, and one day he said, Jeremy, you never want to expose the dirt without planting a seed. And so I just believe that I'm looking at some seed planters. The only reason we're talking about what's wrong is because we're getting to what is right. And so we're going to put our solutions in focus, and we're going to do that in reciprocity. I also want to give thanks. This program was made possible by the generous support of WellPoint Care Network and the O'Brien Fellowship in Public Service Journalism at the Marquette University. It is also sponsored by Listen Milwaukee, a partnership between the Ideas Lab at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, WUWM 89.7 FM, Milwaukee's NPR, Milwaukee PBS, and the Milwaukee Public Library. Please give all of them a round of applause. All right, first up, let's get started. Ann Grove is president and CEO of WellPoint Care Network, one of the sponsors for James Causey's series on Marlin Dixon. I'm going to bring Ann Grove up at this time. Please give her a round of applause.
Thank you. I feel like as we're beginning today, this is going to be a day to remember. Thank you for those comments that lifted us up at the start of our time together, Venus Williams. And thank you, Jeremy, for the introduction. I'm Ann Leinfelder Grove with WellPoint Care Network. I got the memo, no title required. Our organization was formerly known as Saint A. WellPoint provided funding for the Journalism Fellowship that allowed James Causey and Angie Peterson to chronicle Marlin Dixon's life. First and foremost, sincere gratitude to Marlin Dixon for his generosity in sharing his story. Mr. Dixon gave us a wide window into his life to introduce us to the complex context of youth justice, childhood trauma, and incarceration. This decision to share makes us all humbler, wiser, and absolutely better able to advocate for change. Shout out to James Causey for the compassion and care that he used to tell Marlin's story. The depth and authenticity of James's reporting and Angie Peterson's compelling photo images, which are along the wall, guided readers to understand better how the relationship between early adversity and trauma and the intersection with the criminal justice system is sometimes quite imperfect, especially for youth of color. To Journal-Sentinel editors George Stanley and David Haynes, who believe deeply in community journalism, like the work that James and Angie did. And to editors Greg Borowski and Tom Ketting, who worked closely with James to bring these stories to life. Thank you. A shout out to the WellPoint team who is here today, including we've got 10 of our young people with us. These are former foster youth who are forging their way to successful and independent adulthood, and I'm so grateful for them to share their time with us. We also have other WellPoint employees with us, so maybe just a show of hands, thank you for choosing to be here. It is an important discussion. So why did WellPoint fund this journalism fellowship to look at our community's youth? The answer is very simple. Today, right now, WellPoint is serving close to 4,000 people in our care. And of those people, 1,093 of them are youth, ages 12 to 21. We care deeply about their strengths and their needs, the needs and strengths of the youth in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin. WellPoint provides mental health services, supportive case management, and community connections, and we deliver this through a trauma-informed approach. However, you cannot talk about trauma without talking about historical and generational trauma and prioritizing equity as essential to healing. I feel like this conversation today can touch on the essence of that truth. WellPoint's goal is to elevate the discussion about youth justice. How might we, all of us, work to better support youth, to set them up for success, to address their challenges, and also to celebrate them when they thrive, and they do. We see a world defined by key social determinants of health. WellPoint calls this the 5 pillars of stability, and we strive for community conversations that see these pillars as root solutions for youth justice. The pillars are safe and stable family housing, family-sustaining jobs, healthcare that includes physical healthcare, but also appropriate treatment for mental health and trauma, the caring connections of family and community mentors, and education that starts early and strong, carrying all the way through to post-secondary education options that can lay the foundation for the next generation of families. Our youth are the next generation of parents and citizens and our neighbors. How might we advocate that a greater investment in them is an undeniably strong return on investment for our community? As a community, let's stop standing along the banks of the river, plucking the youth from the river when they struggle. Instead, let's go up to the start of the river, where little children and young families might first experience stress or adversity. Preventing and mitigating childhood adversity, or ACEs, creates a different life story for the children and the youth that we can reach. Marlin Dixon's life story calls us to advocate for change, to provide appropriate treatment, to find a different perspective on how to address youth justice through social determinants of health, and to refuse to accept the status quo as good enough for the youth in our community. WellPoint is deeply committed to be part of this community conversation, and we pledge to place new ideas and resources on the table. Thank you.
All right, next we're going to have Mario Willis. He's going to come on up and do a piece on incarceration. Mario Willis is Milwaukee's new poet laureate. Mario was a poet, spoken word performer, and podcaster. He's published 3 chapbooks and released 2 spoken word CDs. All right, thank you, Mario. Come on up.
How's everybody doing? That's what's up. So as a poet, they asked us to set the stage, so I'm gonna try to set the stage for y'all. Is that all right? A poem. There is only so much time left, and got these mortals believing they'll live forever if they can just hide long enough from death. God's been coming, trying to expose the light and the difference between being in the kingdom of heaven and just being an Israelite. Might think the sending cures and checks are the exact same thing, but there's a difference between a wedding band and a toilet bowl ring. There is no help coming. We knew how this would end, just never win, just never wear. The infection rates and body counts on chyrons. Now everybody cares, Rona or steal your breath, but so will police, promiscuity, and addiction, not to mention all those hot wings. Truth is, we are helplessly floating out in space, trying to figure out the moon and stars, figure out how it feels to be in God's place. Can't smell or taste nor outrun fate. When your number's up, your date. Just truth and lies. If he dies, he dies. Bassinets to caskets, it was no surprise. It was always gonna end this way. Life has a debt of death to pay. Prepare yourself come judgment day. You'll understand the truth in what we say. Okay. I need everyone within the sound of my voice to run their fingers through this moment. Scratch the surface of faith. Crinkle every lie in this space into a ball and throw it out. I need us all to be born again. Every soul, each wish, every whisper to stand in accord. See, faith, it comes by hearing, so I need everyone to hear this. You are all God's. Powers as infinite as you dream if you choose to believe in it. The miraculous is achievable by the sum total of our power to believe it. I am so sure of this. So sure, in fact, I will repeat it. You are all God's, but with great power comes great responsibility. Your words, capture them now before you lose them. Hold the oxygen contains your spirits in your palms and ration out your syllables like fine cuisine, because it can be a most delicious dish, but it can be poison. Your words, his words, her words, a treasure with careful consideration, a castle to stand tall over a kingdom, misdirected, a wrecking ball of nuclear proportions. Conjure spirits with your words, set ships to sail, command the stars to shine, exalt the sun's rays to bend corners, pronounce things that aren't as though they were, and watch them occur. There has been a disconnect between us and our divinity. I hope to correct this right now, so I need everyone within the sound of my voice to pay close attention. You are more than flesh and bones. More than your mother's child, 1,000 times bigger than your body. You have been impregnated with a seed, a mission, a purpose. This thing grows inside of you, larger and larger till the skin of your thin heart is unable to contain it, and you explode. I am so sure of this. So sure, in fact, I will repeat it. You are purpose. Take care with your purpose. Some come to devour it. I'm not here to bring you religion. That's a choice. This thing I speak of, a force, a power inside of you like stars in the cosmos, constellations of matter within your chest, whole galaxies in your heart, running rivers of star systems, lakes of fire, oceans of sunshine, continents of consciousness as bright as explosions, indigo visions, rapid fire restlessness, towers as high as the sky within the span of your third eye. I speak to you today of endearing encouragement. Come to loose the bonds that tie your hands to the temporal, unshackle the potential, give you what was already yours to begin with. You can build those things, make these things happen, for they are impossibilities disguised as dreams, and you alone can give those shadows form. Just believe in yourself and know that you are all God's. That's that poem. So, we'll do one more poem for you guys. It's on the theme for the day. It's called Under the Streetlights. I want to thank Mr. Causey for bringing me out and to do some poetry. Thank you, sir. To do some poetry for you guys. And I hope that a robust discussion happens today. It's needed. And a poem. Release the safety. Pull the trigger, the pin strikes the primer, shoots fire out the chamber. Light shows under streetlights. Remember a time we used to fist fight, but them days over with. Killers, young brothers, already victims by design, now must fear fellow former field hands, convinced they took away their fathers from their sons, gave up on God and passed out guns. It's like they released the safety. Pull the trigger, the pin strikes the primer, shoots fire out the chamber. Light shows under streetlights, crimson caskets. Crew neck tees with painted faces erase an entire generation. Mothers losing sons like wrong directions in our section's a trap. The real cage is in their minds. Been trained, prepared to die. No lie, 25 make you old school. These fools killing over kids, iPhones, and gym shoes. Playing the game like there's no rules, no schools, so private prisons just growing like oak trees, filling with more fathers, so the cycle just continues. But statistical data shows more than these reality shows, and we losing. Being wealthy and healthy uncommon in these gutters. So much violence in these homes. He beats her, she beats the kids can't beat the odds, but we used to be in property. They cuffed us when we left the comforts of our native soil, brought us here to these natives' soil. Living the American scheme. Put a brother in the highest office, but man, forget him and all that bullcrap about a dream, because smiling faces don't change situations, especially when you face to face with hard steel. Release the safety. Pull the trigger, the pin strikes the primer, shoots fire out the chamber. Light shows. Under streetlights, they selling us steel. We settling for less steel. Another brother with his eyes closed. Funeral's only time we get together, taping teddy bears round light poles. 4 rails out this living hell, but even the pool queue up for sale. Cold way they play this game they made up. Well, we turned up but wouldn't pick a book up. Disenfranchised, disengaged, despondent, despaired, and full of rage. Today, release the safety. Pull the trigger, the pin strikes the primer, shoots fire out the chamber. Light shows under street lights. Thank you.
Mario Willis, everybody. Powerful poems, powerful. Thank you, sir. We really appreciate you. This next piece I want to bring up Angela Peterson to come and talk about the photos that we see around the room. Please give her a round of applause.
I'm going to be very, very brief because it's not about the photos, it's not about me, it's about the people who entrusted us to tell their story and who are going to share this morning. So I'm just going to keep it very brief. James and I wanted to thank a few individuals for opening up their hearts, opening up their homes, and just allowing us, again, to come and to tell their story. So a few gestures of gifts that we want to give to a few people. Stay where you're at. James will bring the gifts to you. Okay, the first person is Venus. Is Venus still here? Okay, Venus, okay. Venus, first of all, thank you so much for hosting us here. When I walked into this space, it's like I knew that it was a sacred space. And because it's sacred, that was you also extending and opening up your heart to us. So we wanted to give you a gift, so thank you very much for that. They all have various portraits. Marlin, you didn't have to do what you did. You didn't have to agree to anything. You didn't know me. You knew James, but you didn't know me. Thank you so much for trusting me to be in your space to document those very special moments with you and your family. Thank you so much for that. Okay. Vicki got the ball rolling with everything for us too. And thank you again for reaching out to James. It made all the difference completely. And when I first met you, I said, this is a very special woman, but you already knew that, people around you. But thank you so much for reaching out to him and then him reaching out to us, and you knew the value in this individual. So thank you so much for that, okay? And finally, executive, Mr. David Crowley. I have to tell you this. The day that I took his picture was really the coldest day of the year, no joke. And I kept saying to him, try not to look cold. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your personal story, bringing us back to your neighborhood as well, too. And you did look like you were cold. So we have a gesture for you, too, a picture. Thank you so much for that. There we go. Okay. And when you get a moment, feel free to glance at the pictures. If you have any questions about them, just let me know. But again, thank you for the opportunity. Where's our? There you go. Thank you.
All right, thank you to everyone who received the picture. We definitely recognize you all's work and your contributions. And we believe in giving folks their flowers before we see them in their casket. That's critically important. So please feel the love, feel the appreciation. And as long as you have health in your body and wellness in your mind, please contribute to our community in many of the same ways you already have. Please give them one more round of applause. All right, now we have our keynote speaker. I am going to introduce Tessa Duvall, an investigative reporter for the Louisville Courier Journal specializing in policing, criminal justice, and children issues. Duvall is a two-time Pulitzer Prize finalist and a Peabody winner. For her 2018 reporting project, When Kids Kill, for the Florida Times-Union, Duvall spent 20 months examining the Florida counties with the highest rates of kids arrested for murder and manslaughter. She wanted to know why, so she reached out to the young people behind bars to ask. Thank you. Tessa Duvall, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate the chance to be here and to speak with you all. You know, as a journalist, it matters a lot that 4 years later, we can still talk about this story and still find relevance, and hopefully for that, work toward finding solutions as well, because it's not enough to just talk about the problems, as we've heard. It's also about what are we going to do about it. So as you heard, I am currently working in Kentucky at the Courier Journal in Louisville. It's my home state. I've covered policing. I've covered a lot on the fatal police shooting of Breonna Taylor these last couple of years. But before I did all of that, I was in Jacksonville, Florida, in Duval County, where I covered a lot of children's issues, specifically juvenile justice. That was often kids who ended up in prison as teenagers, adult prison, not just juvenile facilities. And these were huge issues in Jacksonville. They played a big role in the prosecutor's election and the public defender's election. And people were really engaged and passionate about understanding these young people and how they were treated in a way that I had not seen before. And so, like you heard, I wanted to understand more specifically about these young people who found themselves in prison for these really serious offenses. Because there were so many cases that when I moved there, I was there for 4 years, and I just remember being shocked at how often we would hear about an arrest for a murder, and it would come back that it was committed by a child, maybe not even a teenager yet. And so, just a few cases that some you may have heard of. There was Christian Fernandez. He was 12 when the prosecutor there tried to charge him with first-degree murder for killing his 2-year-old brother while they were left home alone. There was Terrence Graham. He was not even charged with murder or manslaughter or really even a violent crime. His case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court because he was sentenced to life in prison for a non-homicide offense. He was a teenager when a judge told him that he was so irredeemable that he would die in prison. That went all the way to the Supreme Court, and because of his case, judges can no longer do that. You can no longer sentence a child to die in prison for something like that. He's still in prison, though. He's in his mid-30s, and he is still in prison and potentially getting out next year, but he's been in prison for about 20 years. I also covered the case of an 11-year-old who was charged with manslaughter because he found a shotgun under an abandoned house in his neighborhood and ended up killing a 12-year-old girl because his friends at a party at a sleepover told him, "You won't pull the trigger, you won't do that." But he found this gun and he did. And I also sat in the courtroom as a 12-year-old, he was 15 at the time, but he was 12 when he committed this crime, and I watched a judge sentence him to 30 years in prison. At 15, I couldn't fathom being 30, let alone spending 30 years in prison. And so just the prevalence of these cases, you know, in a community that was already really dealing with a violent crime issue, dubbed Florida's murder capital, I wanted to know why there were so many children that ended up in this situation. And so, you know, as I've covered a lot of these cases, I was going back through the Times-Union's archives. I was, you know, reading stories as, you know, men who went to children as prison were coming back before the courts to be resentenced because of other Supreme Court cases that followed Graham versus Florida. And what I saw were a few things that stuck out to me as I was reading these stories from maybe the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. There were 3 things. First, there was the language that was used to describe these young people. This is the super predator era, where a lot of these folks were sent to prison, that they were irredeemable, that they were monsters, that they were heartless and violent. There was also very little about their circumstances. We heard all about what they did, but we never heard how they ended up in that situation. That is something that I think journalism specifically is still grappling with, but is only telling the official narrative, only telling the prosecutor or the police side of things. And obviously I understand that there are reasons for that, specifically that it's not always wise for defendants to talk to the news media before they go on trial. But what we also never heard were their voices. We never heard about their circumstances, and then at no point did we ever hear from these young people. And I thought, who better to tell us why children end up in this situation than the young people who ended up in this situation? And so from there, I just got a database of Florida prisoners and just filtered through and found all the ones from Duval County who met this criteria. And so from there, I came up with about 100 names, and I wrote them all a letter, and I'll read part of that for you. I said, "Hi. My name is Tessa Duvall, and I'm a reporter with the Florida Times-Union newspaper in Jacksonville. I hope this letter finds you well and in good health and spirits. It must be so strange to get this letter from a reporter so randomly, so let me explain why I'm reaching out. I'm working on a long-term story that seeks to understand why so many kids are committing homicide in Jacksonville. So I'd like to exchange letters with you in order to learn about your life. My goal is to understand your upbringing, your childhood, the things that affected you growing up here in Jacksonville. I want to understand what happens to the kids who are most vulnerable in the community before they are permanently tangled up in the adult justice system. I believe that if adults understand the full extent of problems, then they can find the necessary solutions for them. This is why I'm reaching out to every single person from Jacksonville who's incarcerated due to a situation like yours. Let me be clear about this. I don't want to label or judge you. That's not my goal. I'd like to hear your story from your point of view, and I promise to treat you with respect and dignity throughout the process." And then I just told them, if you have questions, reach out, let me know. And some folks did. They immediately wrote back and just started pouring out their life stories, which to me was a sign that they had perhaps never felt heard. Others wrote me back and said, all right, here's what I need to know about you. If I'm going to tell you about me, I need to know about you. Here are my questions. I need you to answer them before I will consider proceeding, which I respect. And then my favorite was a couple even had their mamas call me just to make sure I was who I said I was. That was my favorite. And so from there, it was just all about building rapport, which is not easy to do over snail mail, and one of the reasons that the project took as long as it did. But ultimately, if they agreed, because this was all about their consent and their stories, I sent them a survey. And I worked with child psychologists, pediatrician, with formerly incarcerated youth and others to really get at what mattered most. And so I'm just going to read you a few of the questions from this survey, because we looked at things like adverse childhood experience, ACEs, but ACEs don't capture the full extent of the trauma that young people can be exposed to. And so I asked, were any of your close family members murdered? Were you ever shot at? Did you ever witness someone being shot? Did you feel pressure to financially provide for your family? Were you ever robbed? Did you ever get seriously injured or hurt or sick as a kid? Did you feel safe in your neighborhood? And I remember one of the people I got feedback from said, well, you're asking about a lot of really heavy things. Let's try to give them some opportunities to talk about strengths and what went right in their lives. And so I also asked things like, who was the person who was always there for you when you needed them? What was that person, and what was your relationship like? What was your greatest strength as a child? And the answers that really stuck out to me from that were how often kids wrote back. I'm sorry, they're not kids anymore. They're kids at the time and talking about their childhood. How often they wrote back and said, no one was there for me. I don't think I had any strengths. Just really something intended to be positive just really ended up being some of the most heartbreaking detail. Just shows how little support these children had. And so from there, gave everyone this survey, and we continued our letter conversation. But one thing that also really stood out to me was as I was getting this feedback. I remember someone writing in a letter to me saying, "Why do you want to write about me? Like, I grew up like everyone else I knew who grew up. There's nothing weird or abnormal about, my story. It's just like everyone else's." And it really stuck with me that his highly abnormal upbringing seemed so normal to him. And obviously there are a million things that go into understanding why children commit violent crime. We could talk about that all day, but for the sake of brevity, we tried to break it down into 4 categories. The first was trauma, which was absolutely universal, not just ACEs, but really exposing, violence outside the home, experiences with homelessness, with food uncertainty. The trauma in their lives was constant and it was compounding. There was no chance to recover from any of this because the trauma really never let up. Additionally, there were family issues, so generational trauma, abuse, substance abuse, neglect, young people feeling unloved and unwanted in their homes. And then there was the environment that they lived in. So these are young people who were really used to just being exposed to violence on a regular basis. They had seen shootings and they felt the need to carry guns. And that was something that a lot of adults couldn't wrap their heads around, was why does a 16-year-old feel like they need to carry a gun? Because would you want to be the only 16-year-old without a gun if everyone else around you does? Would you feel safe in that situation? They thought this was a way to protect themselves and to feel safe. And those guns were easy to get. I remember doing an interview with one young man in prison. We're sitting across the table from each other. And I asked him, "Where does a 15-year-old get a gun?" And he looked at me like I asked him what 2 + 2 was. Like, this was the most obvious question. How could I not know the answer to this? And we had to have a very candid moment. I was like, look, I'm a white girl from Kentucky. I don't know where 14-year-old boys get guns. I'm sorry, I just don't. You gotta spell it out for me. And for them, I think for both of us, that was a moment where we started to understand each other a little more, that, oh, not everyone grows up like this. And that was one of the things that also really stuck with me, because it had never crossed his mind that maybe this was how some people didn't grow up. And these guns were also shockingly inexpensive. And now with things like Snapchat and Facebook groups, they are very easy to trade and for kids to get their hands on for very low costs as well. And then also, a really common factor with these young people and their crimes are that few of them get in trouble alone. They are not setting out with the intention of killing someone, with ending someone's life, but maybe they're bored and they decide, okay, we're gonna play some dice, we're gonna go play ball, and it doesn't go well. As we talked about, a lot of these 16-year-olds have guns, so it's pretty easy in that situation for things to escalate. Or maybe they set out to rob someone and the robbery goes wrong. These are the situations that led kids down this path. And so often what just starts as teenage antics ends up in death. And these are young people that had very little constructive things to do in their neighborhoods. You drive through some of these communities, the parks are in complete disrepair. There are no community centers that they can access. Or if there are programs, they're not programs that teenage boys, because it is predominantly teenage boys, want to take part in. No teenager wants to spend their whole summer in a literacy program. These kids were not being given opportunities to do something that they wanted, which was to either make money or to learn something fun, like how to put together a beat or how to rap or spoken word poetry. These are the kinds of things that kids wanted access to that they just were not getting to scale. And so this project was not an attempt to excuse anyone's actions. I want to say that again. The story was not an excuse, but I wanted it to be an explanation. Because while you're all here and you're plugged into events like this and you read coverage like the story that started this all, there are people out there who have no clue. Jacksonville, for example, is a deeply segregated city. And there are people who live on the south side of Jacksonville in Mandarin or maybe in Orange Park or out at the beaches who have no clue what it's like to be a kid in Northwest Jacksonville. Kids who live in the same county as a beach but have never seen the ocean. They don't know what it's like. So they're like me, they don't know how kids get guns. And so really it was about sort of waking people up and getting them to understand that these are your children in this community and they need help. They need more than what we're giving them. And so these children, what I wanted people to understand was that before they victimized others, they were all victims. All of them endured repeated, persistent trauma. And so the goal is that if we can maybe help the next kid, that they don't end up in that situation. Because again, we're not talking about super predators or psychopaths. We're talking about normal kids from hard circumstances with little support. And so when I did this story, you know, you've always got to talk about the cost for things, because maybe you can't pull at everyone's heartstrings, but money talks. And so when I did this story, it cost about $20,000 to house a prisoner in Florida for 1 year. So if you take into consideration a 30-year sentence, that's over $500,000. So think about it. What could be done with an extra $20,000 a year into schools, into stable housing, into family support, into wraparound services, into trauma-informed and culturally responsive therapeutic services, programs that teens actually want to be a part of, summer jobs. So we know why kids end up in prison. Now is the point where adults have to do something. Thank you.
Thank you, Tessa. You remind me so many instances in my life where I'm helping young people and adults look at them and they call them by the worst thing they did. You're that kid that stole the car. You're those kids that be sagging your pants. You're those kids that be smoking. And the first thing we do is we turn our ears off and we turn our mouths on. So thank you for reminding us to flip that around, to be quiet and continue to listen to our young people in our community. Thank you. So this marks a change in our agenda. We've heard all of our speakers. They came in, we heard poetry, we heard stories. We've even given out beautiful photos to those of us who have contributed to this cause as well. Now we're gonna start off with a panel discussion. It is my privilege to introduce these panelists. The first one up is going to be James Causey, award-winning reporter for the Journal Sentinel. Thank you. Yep, James Causey. Perfect. Oh, okay. Pretending she's not there, thank you so much. James Causey is an award-winning reporter for the Journal Sentinel who worked on the piece on Marlin Dixon. Causey has worked at the local newspaper since 1986. Thank you so much for the work you've contributed to our community. Next up, David Crowley is the Milwaukee County executive. He grew up on the city's north side and discovered his love for politics after becoming a member of Urban Underground, a grassroots organization that boosts youth political awareness and turns them into leaders. David Crowley, everybody. We also have with us, please give a round of applause for John Chisholm, Milwaukee County District Attorney. Thank you. And lastly, but certainly not least, the co-founder of Urban Underground, we have Charlene Moore. She is an outspoken advocate for youth rights. Please give a round of applause for Charlene Moore. And then we also have on the panel, we're going to hear from Marlin Dixon. Please give a round of applause, Marlin Dixon. Thank you. All right, everyone settled in. We're going to have this conversation with the panelists. It's going to be moderated by Tessa and James Causey.
Thank you. Everyone, it's a pleasure to have you here, and it's just a pleasure to have such a well-rounded panel up here to talk about something that impacts us all. So I'm just going to get started. So I want to start with the man who really opened up to me and allowed me to share his story, Marlin Dixon. Marlin, one of the things that I keep getting over and over again is, what can I do to help someone in your position? What's the hardest thing that you faced since you've been released?
The hardest thing that I have faced since being released is making reconnections with my family. Now, I do know that, there was a victim and he would never be, reconnected with his family. And it's just a tragedy all over, but that's been the hardest thing. But I'm looking to possibly be the good thing that comes out of this tragedy. For I know what it's like to grow up, the way we did. I know what it's like to live a life where you have crime around you and you think it's normal. But like she said, it's very abnormal, and I'm learning that. And, the expectations of society, as soon as, I get released, have to get a job, have to get car insurance, I have to rekindle my relationships with my family and my daughter, and it's been hard. But I have hope to, reconcile things, to be the hope that comes out of this tragedy. I was just saying to my friend Vicky that I can't believe I'm out, because I spent so much time in prison. I spent more time in prison than I've been a free man. And so, it's hard, but it's a challenge that I embrace, though, because I remember sitting in them cells countless nights, lonely nights, dark nights, and my life was, very much controlled, where I eat, when I can wake up, when I can take a shower. And I remember just doing countless years in the same cell, and I ain't have nothing going on. And I'm appreciative of taking on this challenge of doing the hard things, doing the right thing. And it's hard, but I embrace it. And I'm glad I'm here to, share it with y'all and talk to you a little bit more about it. Thank you.
Marlin, thank you for sharing your story. I can tell you from a journalist side of things that it matters. It matters to hear from people who are directly affected and have lived experiences. People connect to stories and they connect to the experience of others. Numbers and data are one thing. They tell you the scale, but they don't tell you the heart of it. And so thank you for opening up and to all of us, opening up to all of us here today as well. We have two men sitting next to each other here, grew up in the same areas, but lives have taken different paths, and the role that an eviction perhaps played in all of this is something that really stood out to me when I read this series. And so can you talk about, how your experiences have shaped you, both of you? I mean, and how that informs where you are today, starting back in your childhood.
So I have a girlfriend that I talk to, about everything, and I was telling her how like the life that we grew up in, how normal I thought it was, until I met other people who's from different walks of life, and they like, what? And my life was being, first it started from home. My home was not, a good, stable, balanced home. I had a father that was addicted to drugs, and I had a mother who was long-suffering with him, and who she had 6 kids by, so it wasn't easy to leave, even though he inflicted so much pain, agony, especially upon me. I want to change that, but I come from a place where you do see people getting shot. You do see kids stealing cars. Some people say these kids these days, they steal. I remember being that kid. I remember that kid that was stealing cars because I saw cars stolen. I remember the peer pressure of trying to fit into the neighborhood, but they trying to get you to be something like them. And when you have a tendency to say, no, I'm going a different direction, how hard that can be. And it formed me into a young man. I had a bad temper. I was angry at the world. I was hurt because I was being hurt. And I felt like there was no one that could listen to me. I had talents. I love basketball. I love music. But I didn't see nobody pushing that. But what I seen from police officers to the people I grew up with, to the people that's in my family who I grew up in a home with, I seen nothing but things to distract me from that, to take away from that. And as a result, you spend enough time out there on the streets, then you hearken and get into some pretty major trouble, which happened to me. And so now, I'm this new reformed person because of my experience. It wasn't me, just being in prison that changed my life. It was some divine that changed me first. And that motivated me and inspired me to, okay, now I'm going to learn how to read. I'm going to learn a vocational. I'm about to put my head into the books. I'm about to start showing more love. I'm about to clean up my language, which I did. And as a result of that, of putting in them countless moments, putting in them countless years of just travailing, I had learned how to do all that and some. And now I am this new person, but it all came from this person that I am came from tragedy. And now I'm just hoping to, in the words of my good friend Shannon, change the narrative about how we go about doing things as an individual, as a community, as a society, and hopefully, by doing a little bit more different things, that maybe we can, it's a possibility we can change the world. And so I'm hopeful in that.
Thank you for sharing. So, growing up in 2208 West Vine definitely shapes your life. I remember where, we were almost being taught to be violent. Remember, we used to bring boxing gloves out in the middle of the block and have like literally boxing matches, flipping on different mattresses ourselves. But even when you think about people who are addicted to drugs, some of our friends would just sit on the corner and wait for them to come by and actually just beat up on them. And so when you think about how it shaped me before I came to Urban Underground, I was an angry young black man. My parents were struggling, were addicted to drugs as well. We had issues with mental health. But I always say that a lot of the times the difference with my parents, they were functioning crackheads, right? And I say functioning because my father, both of them are clean now, but my father was a master electrician addicted to drugs, had his own business, right? And my mother, she had to become a Jane of all trades because once they split up, she had to figure out how to make it happen. And so when you think about growing in a neighborhood like that, and it's not to say that everything was all bad, because you can also say that all the young people, we were tight-knit. I probably didn't know anybody's last name. Sometimes you didn't know somebody's first name, but you was definitely at Brown Street Park playing basketball or doing different types of stuff. But I would say that one of the things that being in some of, when we think about marginalized neighborhoods and we think about the challenges that happen in these neighborhoods, in some of these neighborhoods is the tightest knit community as well. You stick together. When I say you stick together, meaning that you're not gonna snitch on one another. But when I think about my own upbringing, because, I always say that, God blessed me by evicting us 2 months before this event happened, because I would have been there myself. And so, when you think about, the upbringing growing up on whether we talk about 22nd and Vine and Brown or being on 23rd and Burleigh and moving these different places because of evictions and, moving every year of your life between the ages of 13 to the age of 25, all of that shapes you. But I would say that, now being a policymaker and also working in politics, I have utilized my experience to actually push and change the narrative. And so, for me, when we talk about housing, when we talk about mental health and drug addiction, like these are some of the things that's at the top list of my platform based off of what I've seen in my own household and what I've seen happening to my own neighbors. And so when we think about trauma, and I would say that Urban Underground taught me this, my first day with Urban Underground, we were taking a trip to Lake Geneva, and I'll never forget this. And we took a trip to Lake Geneva, and we had high schools all over southeastern Wisconsin going to Lake Geneva for a college tour. And I thought I was real cool. I had my little pink polo shirt on. I had some pink and black Air Force Ones. And, I apologize for my dress now. The Brewers need some help, so I figured I'd throw my jersey on. You good. Wish I would have did. But that day, it was doing like a Q&A, and I answered a question, I got the question right, and almost got into a fight with a guy from Racine. And I was, for me back then, I was like, if there's smoke, I'm ready. And I'll never forget it, because it was the time that, I thought I knew what love was, but I didn't realize what love was until this day. And I'm getting ready to get into a fight, and everybody that I've met within the first 24 hours had my back more than anybody that I've ever met before. And so they had my back, they stopped the fight, they stopped everything from going on, and Charlene piped up and got on all of us. But one of the things that she started off with was like, this is the type of relationship that we want people to have. When you think about young people, having that tight-knit bond, understanding there's a level of accountability and having people's back. But the second thing she said is, but not like this. This isn't the way to do this. I don't even know if she remembers this story. But that was my first experience understanding what love was, understanding that, you know what, I don't have to do things necessarily to fit in anymore. And And it changed my life forever because it set me on a path to give back, and so I started to get involved in community organizing and politics because I think that when I had a group of not only adults but young people who wrapped their love around me, to where the only way to give back to those same people was to run for office and focus on those same type of resources that we're always fighting for on an everyday basis. And so it is my experience growing up in this city has really shaped my politics and really focusing on how we make sure that when the tide rises, all the boats rise. Because when you think about many of the neighborhoods, right, you can be in the poorest neighborhood and 3 miles away, you're in the richest neighborhood. Yes. Yeah. And we have to recognize that. And so once we start building a bigger table and bringing more people to the table, telling the story, because I'll tell you that, when James called me about this, he was just like, hey man, I heard you talking about, you grew up in that neighborhood. I was like, yeah. He was like, oh, well, let me interview you about this. And when you're in these types of positions, you don't want everybody to know all your business. But I recognize that particularly as the first African-American elected to this seat, as the youngest person elected to this seat, and literally growing up in the 53206 zip code or 212 zip code and moving all across this city, it is my job as a leader to help other young people understand that I have had my own trials and tribulations. And when they go through their own trials and tribulations, it doesn't define who they are and what their future should be. But there's nothing wrong with utilizing those trials and tribulations to be the fire in your belly to move things forward for the better, for not only you and your family, but the rest of this community. So it has shaped me in those ways.
You both spoke about being angry young men, but we know now you're not born angry. That's trauma. That's the result of what you go to. That's how trauma, especially at a young age, physically changes your brain. It rewires you. Your fight or flight is activated all the time. And so we know now that that is what you were experiencing. But 20 years ago, we weren't talking about trauma and PTSD like that. PTSD was still something that was reserved for veterans of war. And so I want to bring you in to talk about how you work with youth who have been through situations like this and how you sort of get them to turn off that fighting instinct and you work with them and you connect with them in a meaningful way. Can you speak on that for us?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, James, for the invite. And I'm going to speak for me and John. We feel a little obsolete because we can hear you guys speak all day. Listen, we'll just sit back and, have you all take the stage. But I'm so honored to just be in the space with you. He's still my baby. With these young people growing up so quickly and really assuming their role, to answer your question, it takes a village. And we are so blessed to have been a part of not only David's, but hundreds of young people that grew up in this city to be a part of their village. And I think that's what we've gotten away from. We've gotten away from each one teach one. How do we figure this out? Because what we're dealing with right now and what you all have talked about, thank you. It's a societal issue that we're dealing with today, right? We're dealing with trauma in the form of bondage in a way that we're not giving people what it is that they need to survive and to thrive. We've created atmospheres where it's the haves and the have-nots. And we're moving in a place where we can shift things by making sure that we have the right people in the right positions to make the right decisions. And what that means when I say the right decisions, what we're talking about is how do we make communities that are whole, whether you have a lot of money or whether you have a little bit of money. What we did at Urban Underground wasn't out of the ordinary. We didn't do anything magical. What we simply did was provided young people with love and support. We infused that every single day that we saw them. And unfortunately, with some of them, they had to go back into environments where they weren't met with that. But when they came back to us, we reminded them of how important it is for them to make the right decisions, how important it is for them to work toward being their best self and finding their passion and finding what brings them to life every single day. And it's not about pointing the finger, oh, my mom, oh, my dad. Yes, they have been a part of that, but they won't be the only part. It's about you. So we began to be a part of that village and pulled other people to be a part of that village, to support them, because it isn't just about us, because they grow up, they go on, they have families, they go on to live meaningful lives, some more difficult than others. But what we have to remember is, as a society, we have to begin to shift the narrative. It's not just about money, because we know money exists and money is there to do what we need to do. It's about the leadership, and it's about our communities standing up and saying, you know what, we deserve different. We have to fight for what that difference is and allow these young people to know that it's not normal to grow up with hearing gunshots. That's not normal. It's not. So we got to begin to change the narrative to say, you know what, these differences, how do we pull people together in order to shift that?
Good point. Good point. So this comes to District Attorney John Chisholm. You're in a very tough position where you have to make sure that society, the city is safe, and you also have to issue out punishment, I guess. How do you weigh that when it comes to this narrative that we're being too soft on crime? How do you make that balance and determination, and what factors in, and what role does trauma play into those decisions?
Yeah, thanks, James. And first of all, I just want to say that all of the speakers and just the whole setting prior to us getting up on stage was just great. You just never know. I go to different events all the time, and sometimes you just don't know. But what you're putting together here, at least from my impression, is really special. I thought it was just great, and yeah, so thank you. So thank you for inviting me, and since we're not supposed to have titles, just think of me as John, the guy that was born in Milwaukee about 59 years ago at St. Joe's Hospital in an extra long bassinet. That's So, yeah, see, this is a great question. Here's what I'll go back to, and Tess sparked this in my mind with her presentation, and that is back in 1999, there had been a dramatic uptick in shootings, homicides, and many of them were centering around young people that were committing those. And at that time, my boss at the time, Mike McCann, came to me and said, we got to do something about this. And what they did was what we did back then. It was like, let's create a deterrence model, and that was called Operation Ceasefire. So that was going to be a joint federal, state, local operation focused on people that were using firearms to commit harm in the community, and to deter that behavior by giving them very lengthy federal, state, or local sentences. And I was the hotshot young prosecutor at the time who was asked to put that together, and I had no problem with that. I saw the harms that were being committed, but with firearms in the community, and I was more than willing to take on that challenge. And just as we were getting all geared up, a guy named Steve Hargarten from the Medical College of Wisconsin was starting the Firearm Injury Center at the Medical College. And he'd heard that I was putting putting this task force together, and he invited me to join a consortium of people from the full spectrum. Some people that were hardcore Second Amendment people, some people that were, you know, the Brady Center folks. You just had the whole spectrum, but he wanted to hear from, he wanted just to convene people to get them to think in terms of more of a public health approach. Set aside your ideology and think about what could be done to prevent, to intelligently intervene, to, when necessary, suppress. So he challenged me. The first thing he said to me is, what are you going to do to prevent it? What are you going to actually do to prevent it? And I was just sort of like, well, put guys in prison and deter it. You know, that was actually the model I had in place. But I took him seriously. So, and now and the reason I say Tess sparked this is I know I now missed my chance for a Pulitzer, because in like early 2000, I went out to the secure detention facility as a young ADA, and I came prepared. So I went and because there were about 90 young men in detention at the time, I broke it up over a couple days. And what I did is I wanted to meet with these young people that were in detention for really serious offenses, you know, and I wanted to talk to them about the issue of guns. And so I came prepared, and I had 4 questions too for them. And I came prepared with maps, and I had pictures, because in the Army they told us if you can't read, we got pictures. And, and so I was ready. And so I went in there with this group. You know, these are young men, 15, 16 years old, and many of them there for really serious offenses, including firearm offenses. And I did the same thing. I started off with, how many of you know somebody that's been shot, somebody that's been killed, just somebody in your life? And of course, you know, at least 75% of the hands were raised. And then I said, okay, next question is, how many of you actually recognize firearms? And then I pulled out the MPD's most commonly recovered firearms pictures. Those were the pictures. And they were lit up, right? They were excited. They knew every single gun, make, model, caliber. They knew it in you know, practical terms. And then I said the third question, could you get your hands on these? And they all laughed and joked, and you know, it's like, yeah, we can get our hands on these in a minute. And the final question is, where do you live? Because I had come prepared with what were considered the sort of those thermographic hotspot maps showing where all the shootings took place, where all the homicides took place, where all the robberies took place, where all the assaults took place. And I wanted them to point out where they lived. And then my very final question was, how many people were killed in the city of Milwaukee last year? And what would you guess the answer was? In reality, it was probably, I'm just going to say, it was somewhere in the range of about 120 at that time, about 120. You want to guess what the young gentleman told me at the time? Thousands. Wow. Thousands. They thought that there were thousands of people that had been shot and killed. And so that's when I knew that deterrence alone wasn't going to penetrate that, right? That there had to be more to it than that. And so that's been the struggle from, and I know I'm short on time, so I'm just going to, I'll just wait for follow-up question, but that's taken me on a path where, yes, I understand that as part of my job, my obligation is to secure public safety. And when people take acts that so harm the social compact and so harm other people that sometimes the only alternative left to us is to remove them from the community, then the question becomes how long? And what do we do with them while they're removed? And how do we bring them back into the community in a way that allows them to live lives that contribute to the community and support their families and reintegrate in a meaningful way? So that's been a challenge, but all I can tell you is that you're absolutely right, James. The dilemma is always that, and that is that the tools that I am given are generally geared towards just the short-term, easy solution, remove somebody, do it now, and take the next one in line. That's pretty much the way the system is geared. I'll talk a little bit more later about things that we're trying to do to really implement that public health perspective. Community prosecution, or now community partnership is what we call it. All of our early intervention efforts, the work we do with the drug treatment court out at children's court and the family treatment court, all of the things that are really predicated on the issues that you're hearing about right here, which is the trauma. The final thing I'll say is that I was also prompted to look up October of 2010, I wrote an article with Ken Strait, UW law professor, about changing Wisconsin's laws as it related to people 16 to 24 years old, so that we would give courts more flexibility to take into account brain development, trauma, and we're an all or nothing state. You know, that's just the way it is. We are an all or nothing state, and that means that if you commit an offense and you're charged and you're convicted, there's very limited options for what we can do for you, particularly as a young person. And what I believed in, and I still believe in, and Ken Strait, the professor, believes strongly in as well, was that we had to create more options that allowed us to see how, if somebody has to be removed from the community, then let's see how they are a year from now, 2 years from there, 5 years from now, and are they now a different person, and are they ready to come back in? So I point that out as well, as that, by the way, nobody ever changed any of the laws the way we suggested yet. So that was 12 years ago. So that doesn't surprise me either. We still haven't fixed Lincoln Hills, and that was 8 years ago. So, yeah. But anyway, sorry, I talked too long.
No, you're fine. I promise I did not steal his idea. I promise. Okay. Marlin, how old are you now?
I am 34.
And you spent how long in prison?
18 years.
Okay. And you have supervised release. You've got this time on paper.
Yes, I do.
Can you tell us about what are the requirements for that, and how does that still affect you?
Well,
and how long? Yes, that's the other important part. Yes.
Well, what that means is when they gave me 18 years and 22 out, they really gave me a life sentence. Because now I am walking on thin ice once I get out because of my rules. Like, for instance, I have one rule that says I can't be around no one with firearms, whether they have them legal or illegally. I have a brother. He got license to carry, conceal. So I asked, like, okay, how do I resolve that situation if I'm with my brother and he has his legal firearm? I was told that if my brother has his firearm, he has to leave it somewhere else. I asked, well, won't that be, kind of like infringing on his Second Amendment right to protect himself at all times just because I'm a felon and I'm on paper? And they tell me that you have to stay away at all costs. So I even ask, what if I accumulate stuff and a house and a home and a family, how do I protect them? What do I do to protect them? What was said to me in literal words was, you just have to take it. So now...
And how long do you have to just take it?
22 years. Anything can happen in 22 years.
So I can add, Wisconsin's truth in sentencing state. So that means he had to do every second of his 17 years, and now if he gets revoked, he could do, there was 18 years, and if he gets revoked, he could potentially have to do 22 years.
Yeah.
Every second.
So as much as people support me, I just want to let everybody know it can be taken away from me like that. Yep. And these rules are put in place. I just want to make clear, these rules are put in place. They are not to make you better.
That's it.
They are to contribute to the recidivism rate. That's what it is. And so, right now, I have a lot of odds against me. I'm 3 to 5 times more likely to go to prison within my first 3 years of being out. And it's because of certain rules. They tell me you can't be around felons. I'm like, well, the neighborhood I moved to, they got plenty felons. How do I tell them, hey, y'all got to move out the neighborhood? Wow. Because y'all felons, and I'm on paper, you know. The thing of you can't hang around known gang members. I'm like, well, what do I do to resolve that? Do I go up to people and ask them, are they a gang member or a felon?
Right.
And the answers that I heard were ridiculous. They either told me nothing, or they told me, hey, it's just the way it is. Life is hard like that. And so now I see the odds that I'm up against being on paper, because it's really not about rehabilitating me. It's about how do we get him back in prison to make money up off him once again. And I tell you this, why would Wisconsin want that? Well, I was in prison. I didn't work jobs in prison where I fed 1,100 inmates, cleaned up after them, received $7 every 2 weeks for doing it. I have worked on farms 15 hours a day, receive about $240 every 2 weeks. I have seen that they make clothing, they make chairs, and the thing is that Wisconsin prison is about keeping prisoners, which is their employees, in there so they can run them jobs because they make lots of money. And so when I was let go and the COVID-19 virus was in full effect, I remember my PO calling me and asking me, you know, hey, do you have any drugs in your system? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? I'm like, no. Why you ask? I've been doing the same thing, just trying to grow, trying to survive, trying to live. She was like, well, I just want to let you know that we are back in full swing. We do home visits. You have to come visit us. And I just want you to be clean because them bodies that they had let go during COVID-19, they are trying to recruit them bodies back. So she was like, you need to walk very straight. Like, it's impossible.
So that brings up an interesting question, and I want the other three panelists to try to answer this. 22 years of extended supervision, 18 years in, is there any way or anything that could be done to reduce that extended supervision? Because if not, but in 22 years, in 20 more years, how old will you be, 54?
54.
That would be when you're officially off. So he'll have to be 54 years old, and that means not making a mistake before he's completely free.
Also, what that means is if I don't complete my 22 years and I go back to prison, all the time that I did out here, it starts over.
Yep.
And so now I can spend more time on paper than I should, than what the judge gave me. I can spend more.
So David, Charlotte, and then the DA, when you hear that, what could be done, or is there anything that we could do, or is there anything that could be done to change that?
I'll let the...
Sure, yeah, that 2010 article, implement that. What we basically, it was really simple. We basically said, you know, there's truth in sentencing, which we have now. Before then, we had indeterminate sentencing. That meant a judge could say that, Marlin, you did something really bad. You're going to have to be held accountable for that, but I'm going to give you this range of time, and if you do this, this, and this by the time you're, say, 22 or 25. I'm going to bring you back in. I'm going to talk to the people that have evaluated you. And if you've become a different person, you're a mature man now, you're ready to go out into the community, you know what? We're going to allow you just to go out on regular parole, and eventually, and you could even shorten that time down significantly. All we suggested is that, particularly for young people that committed crimes, give judges the option of either doing that, or if it's really horrible and you know they had been in the system for long periods of time and just not responded, then yes, you could still do truth in sentencing. So we didn't want to get into the all or nothing approach because we knew we'd lose that politically. But just think about the advantage. The other advantage to that, quite frankly, is that the prison system costs the state on a biannual basis about $2.5 billion. And so what you would ideally like to do is actually reduce the number of people in prison if you can do so safely, and then reinvest some of those dollars in different directions, right? You know, so. Doesn't mean that people that hurt other people aren't going to be held accountable, and we always have to keep the victim's voice in mind when we're talking about these issues. But the reality is that in my experience, and most of the people that are experience this right now, the difference between being the victim and the offender is just temporal. It's just a matter of time, right? You've been a victim before you hurt somebody else, and it's that back and forth cycle. Our system holds people accountable for frozen moments in time. You know, this is, you did this, you were arrested for this, you were prosecuted for this, but we rarely take into account how many times you may have been a victim prior to that act occurring. We're trying to change that through you know, actually, you know who some of the leading advocates of cognitive behavioral therapy are? It's the domestic violence advocates, the people that are traditionally identified as advocating primarily for women that have been exposed to domestic violence, but they get it. They're the ones who say, well, look, you know, before Marlin did this or anyone else did that, they were probably exposed to a lot of trauma and violence themselves as kids. So why don't we start addressing those behaviors even after they've committed an offense as part of the accountability? They should have some therapy involved in that, right? And that means, and part of that is reaching out to the victim, and restorative practices and all of those different things are critical to becoming a more rational, a more humane community. That's ultimately but we always take the shortcut, and we just want punishment exclusively. And I'm not saying that punishment isn't appropriate. I'm just saying that if it's all you're doing, then you're not creating the long-term conditions for change. Well, you know, the only thing that would be possible would be a sentence modification, and that's the short answer. It's not likely, is what I would tell you. And then, because you have to have a new factor, is what it is. Now, one of the projects that I'm the only DA in the state doing it, and it comes with plenty of political risk, believe me, right now in today's world. But we have been looking with the Remington Center and the legal aid. We've looked at anybody that was sentenced to de facto juvenile life sentence. We've been looking, and we've been going back and trying to modify some of those sentences. That's what we're looking at.
I'm going to be really, really brief. And John, you mentioned this a little earlier. The answer that we need is changing the laws. We cannot do anything systemic. We can do a one person here and a one, you know, we have to change the laws. Until we change the laws in the state of Wisconsin, we're going to continue to have individuals that come out and are cuffed to our system, that they have to walk a line so straight. And this is if Marlin doesn't piss anybody off, that just all of a sudden call his PO and make up something. Make something up. And they have like, you know what, there's nothing I can do. I have to arrest you until we situate things. And then everything that he's worked for, he's now into a job, he's not, all of that, this process of continuously starting over and over and over again. We have to stop this in this country. We have to stop this and say, you know what? People are not commodities.
Yep.
We are dealing with human beings, and young people that make mistakes, 5 years, 10 years, they are not the same human beings. If we all think back about the stupid things that we did when we were younger, man, some of us should have been in jail. What we're saying is we have to do things differently, and this country has a propensity to say when you do something wrong, we're gonna lock you up. Instead of saying, you know what, when you do something wrong, how do we use restorative justice to show you and support you the wrong that you did? We have to change the laws, and until we change the laws, we're going to continue to have the same things that we're dealing with today that we dealt with 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. It's going to continue to be in our cycle. So we have to change the laws.
I just have to double down on what Charlotte just said, because that's really where we are. I mean, when you think about our probation and parole, you know, there are few states that have probation and parole that are longer than 5 years. You know, there's no reason why we are telling an individual that we're going to be watching over you for the next 22 years, and you can't be around certain family members, you can't be around certain people. This is really about changing the laws, and one, we have to recognize, you know, and you know, we have to recognize that we have a very imperfect system. Yep. We have to recognize that it also is a prison industrial complex. Yeah. And so when you think about the state of Wisconsin, no, we don't have any private prisons here, but we have so many towns, so many villages all across this state that used to do a lot of farming. They went from herding cows to now herding people. And so in some cases, in reality, when you think about the prison industrial complex, some of the local communities, the local economies in this state will literally falter because they rely so much on, you know, it may be an unpopular opinion, but farming people who particularly come from southeastern Wisconsin. And so at the end of the day, this is really about how do we continue to work with our legislators. I have to give our DA, you know, major kudos, because he has been at the forefront of this. And he isn't liked a lot in certain places across the state because he understands what is happening in our own backyard. But we have to combat this narrative that people cannot be rehabilitated. Yes. And when you think about what we're seeing right now, particularly now with our young people, right? Because we're talking about, we ain't even talking about the juvenile justice system, right? Think about it this way, right? It used to cost us as a county about $650 a day to send a young person to Lincoln Hills. But because we're sending less kids there, the price has doubled. So now it costs Milwaukee County $400,000 to keep a young person in Lincoln Hills for a year.
And it'll go up in July.
And it'll continue to go up when we're doing the right thing, right? You think about that, right? What can I do with $400,000 a year, right? That is the cost to go to Yale for 4 years, room and board. So we have to change this. We have to have a real conversation on what rehabilitation looks like. Because right now, we're treating the prison system as a place to literally just house some of our, you know, house individuals who actually been crying out for help. Our prison system shouldn't be looked at as the space for people to go to get their mental health looked at. So at the end of the day, this is really about how do we challenge the status quo and change the laws. And honestly, this shouldn't be, and in many states, it is not a partisan conversation. Because many Republicans in other states are doing the right thing, understanding that the cost to the taxpayers, the cost to lives is far greater than just locking people up.
Yes.
I want to do something here. I want to keep this panel going. Usually please give them a round of applause. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But I don't want that round of applause to signal that the conversation has stopped. You're here not to just passively get all of this food, and I hope you're full, because now it's time to set a table. What we're gonna do next is we're gonna ask all of you all, because you showed up to this conversation, to now begin to contribute solutions. So we have tables in the back, tables on the side, and we have tables downstairs. What we're gonna do next is I want you all to sit at those tables, and I want you all to specifically talk about long-term and short-term strategies to addressing those childhood traumas you all talked about and youth incarceration. It's time for all of us to get to work. We're going to read off the solutions from the tables. They've been synthesized as well. One solution is voting, encouraging and developing community-centered public servants who can go and take office and influence institutions. Additionally, with voting, folks have up here educating the public and encouraging them to use grassroots efforts as a way to vote as well. School investment is going to be important, changing laws, particularly when it comes to guns and all the other laws that influence how teachers teach and young people experience in education. We also want to train leaders on trauma-informed care, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and other things that can help them better create environments for young people to be educated in. Family services. We want to follow through on the services we promise our communities. We want to make sure we're able to mentor our young people and in professional spaces when folks get new jobs. We want to make sure we invest in family services like child care and basic living needs. We want to also galvanize social media, someone put. Use social media to change narrative and influence the way people act in their communities. We also want to use social media to decrease the stigma that we have around mental illness, incarceration, and trauma. The next few things are laws, understanding legislation, and how laws impact individuals. We also want to look at communities and ensuring that laws that are within communities and in smaller towns as well can be reflective of the population. Restorative justice is something we should start using. We also want to consider diverse juries and really diversifying the entire incarceration system, engage legislation, and we want to make sure we can find alternatives to probation, especially probation that leaves folks susceptible to imprisonment long-term after they've been released from incarceration. The last four ideas before we bring up Brenda Wesley are community assets, making sure we go where people are, not just sitting in those spaces and places that represent those organizations. We also want to connect suburban areas with inner city areas and folks who have different backgrounds. Mental health. Someone said therapy should be affordable. We should identify how to help people help themselves as well, and educate on stigma and decreasing stigmatization. The last two ideas are racism. Racism is systemic. It also impacts folks individually. People said that they want to create more practices that diversify people, but also have that be a part of the conversation as well. And then lastly, but certainly not least, is young people. Understanding that they are not just the youth of tomorrow, but they are the youth of today. Recognizing that their leadership should be pivotal and centered within our communities and institutions. Youth who get out of prison and or age out of foster care should be the ones who are leading the change because they have the experience and then plan ahead to meet their basic needs as opposed to incarceration or other things. Prevention, prevention, prevention. All right, those are your synthesized notes and solutions as well. Thank you all so much for getting together and offering those up.
Listen MKE is a community project in partnership between the Ideas Lab of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, WUWM 89.7 FM, Milwaukee's NPR, the Milwaukee Public Library, and Milwaukee PBS.